Okay, so welcome everyone to today's session. My name is Abimbola, and here are our guests. We have Michael, we have Ayodele, and we have Jonathan, and they'll be talking to us about their journey in terms of entrepreneurship, innovation, and how they're able to solve some of the world's complex problems, birthing these solutions that are making waves. So not to waste so much of our time, we have just 30 minutes to do whatever we have to do because we have classes to get back to. So whatever questions that you have, you can write it down so that you do not forget. And we'll be giving about 10 to 15 minutes to ask questions. So I'm sorry if you're not unable to call everyone to ask these questions. We'll pick a few people so we can maximize time. And afterwards, you can do an email to our director and she can forward your further questions so that they can be answered after the question. So welcome. So I'll be doing a brief introduction. Then after the brief introduction, we'll get into them explaining some of the innovations that they've created. Then we'll go into asking the questions, then the Q&A session. Are we okay?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to quickly just give a brief bio of Michael Flood, who is the founder and CEO at Alpine Frog, LLC. Michael is the founder and CEO of Alpine Frog. In this role, he provides advisory and consulting services to public and private entities, primarily in the technology, telecom, public sector, and education industry. Alpine Frog specializes in innovation strategy, digital equity, public policy and advocacy, marketing engineering, and all components of go-to-market planning and execution. You're welcome, Michael. Thanks for joining us today. So the next is Jonathan. For more than 15 years, Jonathan has been helping organizations and founders generate social impact alongside industry-leading returns. Currently works on an operational consulting focused on growth, supporting early-stage companies with social impact ventures, adapt their business to scale and potential scale or acquisition. So he serves as a board member for Global Good Consulting, a subsidiary of Global Good Fund. In this capacity, he helps guide overall strategy of firms which provide companies and organizations strategic advice on how best impact the world through elevation of underrepresented founders. So you're welcome, Jonathan. Over to Ayodele Ogunnoki. I hope I pronounced that right. And can you hear us?
Yes, you did, and I can hear you very clearly.
Awesome. So she is a program manager for the 2X Ignite program at 2X Global, where she focuses on advancing gender-less investing initiative. With over 8 years of experiences in the finance industry, she's dedicated to leveraging finance for social impact and sustainable development. Prior to her current role, she has spent 5 years at Symbiotic Group developing deploying private debt to microfinance banks across East, West, and Southern Africa. You're welcome, Ayodele.
Thank you very much.
So we have such diverse and interesting guests with us today. So I hope that by the end of this session, we all will take 1 or 2 things out of this and also integrate this into our learnings, as well as our future endeavors going forward. So my first question is for Ayodele Ogunnoki. How do you balance the pursuit of social impact with the need for financial sustainability in the venture? We know that developing social venture is tough, particularly where there are limited financial resources. So how do you tend to balance this, creating social impact, as well as the need for financial sustainability in any venture anyone wants to try to create?
Thank you so much. So I would approach this from the lens of an investor because my background has been in investing through private debt in microfinance institutions, and then more recently through private equity in venture capital companies in Southern Africa. What I've found is that, the triple bottom line is possible. So that's people, planet, and profits. It's just that you have to strike a balance. So when you're thinking about social impact, you also have to consider the social impact as a profit, and not pursue aggressive financial returns. And the best way that I've seen this incorporated through ventures is in establishing the mission and vision of the company. So at the start of the design process, as the company is looking to solve a problem, they try to embed impact from the onset. So let's say if we were to look at mobile money, for example, initially created as a tool for convenience to be able to collect and facilitate payments in an easy way. But the knock-on net effect was that it opened up a pool of financial inclusion, banking the unbanked, thanks to increased mobile access. And then we've seen that through this, the facilitation of mobile money has brought about the innovation of fintechs who are looking at financial inclusion at the core. So trying to find ways to have interoperability so that it is being able to leverage the mobile money platforms to enable the underserved to access bank cards, to access credit, which typically wouldn't be provided to them because they are overlooked. So I would say that, from the onset of designing the business and your purpose or your solution, try to see through or develop a theory of change. So looking at how your solution is going to affect the stakeholders, so that is your shareholders and your end clients, and through that design process, embedding a net impact. So it could be establishing a company will create jobs, but are those jobs sustainable? Are you paying people well? Is the environment, sufficient for your employees to thrive? And then looking at your pricing, is it fair for your customers? So it's really about questioning what you're doing and the solution you're bringing to the market, and ensuring that while there's impact, you're also ensuring that there is a need and people are willing to pay for your services, and that in turn will ensure that there is financial sustainability. And when you're talking about the scarcity of capital, I think when your solution is something that really addresses a core need, people tend to follow. So you just need to find someone that's willing to lead, someone that understands the impact you're trying to derive through your solution, and someone who is willing to provide patient capital to walk the journey with you. So there are investors who are willing to provide patient capital. It just takes time to find them. But I think, leading with the mission and leading with social impact from the beginning will make your, finance sourcing process much shorter.
Thank you so much, Ayodele, for that insight. So 3 things we've been able to pick up from this is developing a theory of change. And when you want to develop any idea, embedding impact into it makes it more fascinating. Plus, we must figure out how to also finance that in terms of who we're employing, how we want to employ them, and how we want to sustain that process, which is crucial. Because you cannot develop a social impact or a business without having to pay people to drive it, because they will not drive it the way that it should. So thank you very much for that insight. Don't forget, if you have questions, just kindly jot them down. We'll take them during the Q&A session, so you do not forget. Right, thank you. So now over to Jonathan. For you, what are some of the unique challenges you face in implementing social impactful innovation? And how do you get to mitigate the risks? Because we know that, well, unlike the private sector side, the social impact sector is more complex because you're merging both non-profit and for-profit, right? Scaling impact as well as driving the necessary profit that is needed. So, and it's quite complex because you have to design solutions that fit into people's needs, as well as drive profit to sustain the impact of the venture. So in your opinion, how do you get to manage these risks and also drive the solution?
Sure, it's a great question. I think I'm going to piggyback a little bit on the last answer at first and say, I work with an organization called Global Good Fund. It has several sort of pursuits, the primary place we started was with the fellowship. And that was a fellowship that went out and found global entrepreneurs who were trying to change the world through impact-focused businesses. And what we found is the most consistent theme amongst those who were most successful was that they had ideas where you could not divest the impact from the profit, right? So it's not, oh, you just find your way into impact. It's that kind of is where you start. And that doesn't have to mean you're sacrificing profit along the way. And there's nothing wrong with, sourcing, financing, or accessing capital through philanthropy or other, public grants or things like that. But you're accessing a very different pool of capital if you have an idea that is impactful but also profitable. And so I think that's a way of perhaps mitigating financial risk a little bit. And then I think another aspect of Global Good Fund and what I'm on the board of is the consulting firm. We help global businesses who want to change the way they impact the world. And a lot of times these are established companies, businesses, organizations that come to us. And even though they have this track record of immense success and are very profitable organizations, when they are trying to implement change or impact in some of these regions, they have no idea what they're doing. They need a trusted resource. They need someone who understands at a ground level what's going on, whether it's regulatory, in the public sector, whether it's the current underpinnings of the economy. I remember we had a fellow who was in Argentina, which is a very, very difficult environment in which to do business. There's a lot of protectionist policies, and I don't know if any of you have covered that in any of your classes, but it's a really tough place to be a startup. And so we were advising her, and it was even difficult for us. We had to know what we didn't know, and knowing the limit of your own knowledge, I think is a really key aspect of understanding how you can start to mitigate the risks of what you don't know. So I think there's multiple ways to approach it, but ultimately staying true to that idea, at the very foundational process at the start of what you're doing, you're going to know your idea best. You're going to know your pursuit best. And so as long as you stick true to that and then take advice where you need it, I think that's probably the best way to mitigate risk along the way in terms of generating impact.
Awesome. So knowing what you're all about in terms of the solutions you want to develop, knowing it to the core of why you're developing it is one of the most crucial things that can help you sustain it, right? Thank you so much for that insight. I picked that. So we'll quickly go over to Michael. For you, what emerging trends or technologies do you believe hold the most potential for transformative social impact?
Sure, thank you. So I'm a little bit biased. I kind of grew up after I got out of college. I grew up in the telecom industry, and so broadband writ large is one of those areas that I feel is underlying a lot of transformational change that's going on right now. So when we look at the developments going on in broadband, I'm talking about everything from in more developed countries, the expansion of fiber infrastructure, to the advances in wireless technology, so 5G, 6G, Wi-Fi 7. Future generations of that coming along, low Earth orbit satellite technology, which is bringing internet obviously to people all over the world that previously were not connected. And the reason that that's like such a transformative technology is because that ends up expanding access to education, access to networks of influence, communities of practice. It expands access to the forthcoming AI capabilities that we see developing rapidly. In fact, we're actually seeing that bandwidth requirements are going up as AI's usage is ramping up, and that's probably going to continue and create some new digital inequities we have to tackle. Also on the infrastructure level, these broadband networks are what are also powering kind of the Internet of Things, the sensor networks, autonomous technologies around transportation, transit, just a lot of different areas that broadband is underpinning. So broadband is one of those, kind of key areas. Outside of broadband, I would also say that I'm very interested in where things are going with transit as a way to deal with issues around climate change and carbon footprints. Autonomous drone delivery is another interesting area where drones are really going to take off in a lot of ways. I mean, I know today we kind of see them we see them out there. It's like, oh, somebody's playing with their drone recreationally, or there's a really cool innovative project going on this specific campus. But we really aren't too far away from where we're going to see drones really commonplace. We're still working out some of the rules and the regulations and the safety concerns, and I think some of that still has to be done. But as we look over that 5 to 10 year horizon, I think drones will actually be used in a lot of ways. And when you combine broadband, you combine drones, you combine autonomous driving, what you're really talking about is efficiency in the economy that allows people to do things from where they are without having to travel as much. And the less we move people and goods via inefficient means of transportation, the greater that, that impact reduction is on, climate change and other carbon footprints. So, the broader work from home movement, the broader distance learning movement, that not only is providing people access to put their skills to use in industries that they may not have had before, but they're not traveling, they're not driving, on our streets, on our roads on a daily basis, and that is lowering their carbon footprints as well. So there's kind of this beneficial effect going on with those technologies and the climate goals as well.
Awesome. So talking about climate change, I'm sure many of us know what that is and the need for the world to reduce its carbon emission, which he has broken said, because connectivity gives us access, even when you're creating solutions with limited finance. Once people get to see or get to know what you do or what you're about, it gives you that exposure to tap into a new network of people, which he has clearly stated out, right? Which is connectivity for access, network for influence, and community of practice. Because when you do what you ought to do, you attract the people who buy into that idea, then you become a person of influence through what you bring about. So talking about climate change, talking about what you all do, and also some of the words or some of the things you would like to tell every single one of us to inspire us to do better and to do more. Based on your, so I'm asking these questions to Ayodele, to you, Michael, and to you, Jonathan. Based on what you've been doing so far in terms of social innovation, starting with you, Jonathan, what would you say has been the most challenging part of being a social entrepreneur or a social impact person? What would you say has been the most challenging, and what one word or one sentence would you like to say to us to inspire us to be better? Because I know social entrepreneurship can be really hard, very, very hard. Trying to make a change in the world, trying to find finance, trying to find the right people, it's hard. So what would you say is your one advice to us based on your challenges and based on what's for us to inspire us?
Sure, of course, yeah, it's a great question, challenging to whittle that down, but I will do my best. Maybe this is the consultant in me speaking, but it's about trust and it's about relationships. Stay true to your ideas, I said that before, but also make sure you find people who you can trust. There are no shortage of people who will give you advice. You have to determine, and you're the ultimate arbiter of what advice you're going to trust. And I think as long as you stay true to that mission of impact, that you'll continue to do well. So there's no one way into it. I'm never an entrepreneur myself. I help others, I guide others, but find your way there and find people you can trust.
Thank you. So find people you can trust along the way. Over to you, Michael.
Yeah, well, I would say expertise and work. To me, those are really, really paramount. I mean, how many of you have been part of a class project and you don't have to point at any of your classmates, but you're on a team and somebody steps forward and is like, I'm going to take the lead on this, I'm going to do the work, and everyone else is like, great, that person's going to do the work. Let's let them chart the course of where we're going. That will hold true throughout your career. I've seen it happen in political circles where you can have a convening of people from all over the state or all over the country, 50 people on the call, they need to set a policy agenda, and somebody just kind of steps in and like, how about I write the first draft? And everyone's like, great, and that person now is setting the tone for the entire direction of that initiative. That holds true in business, it holds true. Now, you can only do that if you are understood to have the expertise and if you are willing to do the work. But if you do those things, people will continually look back to you to chart the course on the next initiative. And that's how you build. And as you build that network and that trust and those people start to relate to you, it opens up opportunities that you can then leverage to build your social impact.
Thank you. So I see this in two ways. Build yourself to be able to do what? Attract people that you want to lead. So a leader only can lead by knowing, by doing, and by attracting the right set of people. So over to you, Ayodele. What do you have for us?
Thanks, Abimbola. So I would say I agree with both panelists. I think the one thing I would like to add, given that you've highlighted that the journey isn't an easy one, Firstly, you don't have to walk it alone. Your co-founder might be sitting next to you in the room. Try to maintain those relationships. And I think the second thing would be to really question your why, like what is driving you to want to be in the social impact space? What is keeping you going, in delivering the impact theme that you're choosing, to solve a problem for? Because when the journey gets tough, that's the only thing that's going to ground you, and reinforce, your efforts, because there will be many distractions along the way. And I think, having surety in your why, and understanding, why you really want to solve this problem will keep you going. And as I iterated, your co-founder is probably sitting next to you. You really don't have to do this on your own. And we've seen, like from my experience with founders, trying to be solo founders, and you don't have to do that. The journey is much more interesting having an expert next to you as well. So those are my 2 cents I'd like to contribute.
So at the end of today, kindly speak to each and every single person here, because you don't know who the founder is, who the co-founder is, because we need people. Despite our knowledge, despite our expertise, we need people, because if you were to do it alone, I guess we would not have everybody. So try to connect, try to speak up. You do not know who is next to you or who is going to fund the project that you're working on. The person might be a student, but then you get, so let's leave the conversation there. So now we're open to Q&A session. Thank you so much, Michael, Jonathan, and Ayodele, for the very insightful conversation. These are some of the conversation you will not like to hear. So anybody has questions? So we have 10 minutes. So hold on. You first.
Thank you all for being here. Really, I know I speak for everyone. I really appreciate your insights and what you've shared so far. I'm really curious. I know we have board member, founder, and folks from different places. But what questions do you ask your teams respectively to keep social impact high on the agenda? And what is top of mind for you when it comes to continuing the conversation?
So do you have a preferred?
No, everyone.
Okay.
Well, I'll go first. In terms of, I've had teams at the groups, the companies, divisions that I've led, where we are trying to do both, right? We're running a profitable enterprise. Financial sustainability is paramount, because if you go out of business, you're not going to impact anybody. So obviously that's important, and you have to keep that top of mind. But also, for us, it is, who are the stakeholders that we're trying to impact, and how do you constantly keep their the impact you're having on them front of mind in the way you communicate. Obviously, in the business world, we tend to, if you get too entrenched on the business side of things, you're going to tend to have your communication steer towards the business side of things as well. When you're trying to walk this line between building a venture that is appreciated for its impact as well as its business success, you have to constantly be coming back to that message. Like, who are you impacting? What are the real change stories? In our case, when I was at Kajit and we were dealing with digital equity, and we were talking about, a low-income middle school student in an urban center whose family had never had a computer before, and now we're creating digital equity that's expanding their access to opportunity, but telling the story in their words of like how it impacted them and what they were able to do and learn, motivates the entire team, and you have to encourage the team to share those stories with each other so that you build a culture that stays focused on the impact and not just on the, hey, we sold another subscriber connection. That's not that interesting.
Awesome. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I do. Just a couple things. Again, I feel like I'm going to drive this point home a little bit. Global Good Fund was created with the idea that we wanted to serve exclusively social impact focused businesses. I don't think there's ever been an easier time to go out and find organizations that exist that are like that. And they're not just nonprofits, right? We have an impact fund. We have an investment fund. There's venture capital funds, 2X. There are so many opportunities for you to go and seek out people who are exclusively focused on the impact that you generate. And I think as a founder, from that perspective, it's, again, make sure you keep yourself as close as you can to that revenue generation. That's going to make you more attractive to that pool of capital. And that's going to, like I said, we used to say we support exclusively social impact founders. Now we support profitable businesses that they also do social impact. Just because that's kind of the way we think about it. So
thank you for adding. Ayodele, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I do. I think the one thing that we keep top of mind at 2X Global is, who else can we convert, to supporting our mission? Because what tends to happen, I mean, we're a company focused on improving gender diversity across all industries. And what tends to happen is we're preaching to the choir. So it's, really focusing on how can we convert more people to understand why this mission and this vision needs to be executed and solved. So we can bring on more people, and the more people we can convince that this matters, the closer we can get to gender equity. So I think that's the primary thing we think about is, outside of those who believe in what we're doing, how can we convince others to join us?
Thank you so much. So the next question, over to you.
So my question is about policy and how impact-focused entrepreneurs can advocate for policy change. I think obviously in different political climates, what gets passed is kind of at the whims of whoever is in charge or the majority, but then that might not always be kind of the best way. So how do you think about entrepreneurs getting involved in policy, advocating for policy, especially when they feel kind of powerless? What are some avenues that you see that they can use to kind of make that change?
Yeah, I'll say, so my consulting background is actually, I worked for a public policy and national defense consulting firm in DC. So very, very familiar with policy and sort of how the sausage gets made, if you will. I find there's not, these are not controversial ideas. If you go up to anyone on the street and say, do you want to make the world a better place? Every single person is going to agree with you. So what we have instead is really a difference in language. And you have to be able to speak the right language. Your idea of changing the world, of generating social impact is probably not going to be controversial, but the way you present it, the way you frame it to someone can make all the difference depending on whatever regulatory or policy environment you exist within.
I'll just add to that, kind of back to what I was saying about having the knowledge and doing the work. I love policy. I'm a bit of a policy wonk, right? I mean, literally I'll be up at night writing, views on FCC regulatory rule changes, just because I love it. And honestly, when I get into some of these communities where there's hundreds or thousands of people who have a stake in the outcome of a policy decision, I will tell you 90% of them haven't even read the policy documents. They have an opinion and they want to advocate for their opinion, but they haven't read the legalese of the policy documents and dissected where you can change a sentence and have impact. And when you're able to actually do that work and get in the weeds and understand where the policy is going and why a rule is trying to do what it's doing, and maybe it's unintentional that they're making a policy rule that you can see the negative outcome of and you have an opportunity to prevent it by bringing light to that, that actually works a lot. The other piece is on the bipartisan side. So yeah, I think the comment that was made earlier about preaching to the choir, that happens a lot in policy as well, and you have to be very careful about that. You always have to be thinking about what you're trying to accomplish and how are those benefits going to be articulated to both sides of the aisle. They probably are both stand to gain, but the way they view it may be different. And I'll use an example, show some of my political views here in the process, but I'll use an example. When I'm talking about digital equity, if I'm talking to the left side of the aisle, I'm usually talking about the disenfranchised. I'm talking about access to opportunity, the ability to grow, all of our citizens, equally. When I'm talking to the right, I'm talking about economic development, our nation's competitiveness, the fact that without an educated population, our businesses won't succeed. Those are both true, but the language is different. And how you go and talk. So when I go to Capitol Hill and I'm meeting with both Republican and Democratic offices, I'm giving the same message and I'm advocating for the same positions, but the language I'm using is different.
Thank you. Ayodele, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I do. In addition to what has already been said, I would say, from what I've seen is also surrounding yourself with people that have access to, those relationships that influence policy. So, having a board advisor in your committee that's able to share some insights on, where that how do I refer to them now? Group, or like maybe find a regulatory body is leaning toward. It's also coming together. So like if I keep using fintech as an example, because I think everyone understands it. But if you're like 3 to 4 fintechs, the founders can come together, like he said, also shared, reading the policy and trying to understand how it influences your ecosystem, and trying to, have group advocacy to, achieve the change that you'd like to see. One thing that I've noticed on the African continent is that the regulation and policy tends to be reactive. So, they wait until maybe a certain product is deployed on market to see how the market reacts to it, and then kind of impose restrictions on the product. And what has helped in most cases, fintechs, or should I say other innovations that have tend to bypass this risk, is that they're proactive. They start a sandbox. They try to reach out to the regulator to understand what they're doing and explain the impact of their solution on the community or the economy as a whole, so that when this product is deployed, there isn't a negative reaction to it or a knee-jerk reaction, to a policy that essentially restricts the ability of the product. So those are the 2 things I would say is, firstly, have a board advisor that, has some experience in the space, probably an ex-regulator that's able to advise you. Secondly, come together with other founders in your industry, go through the policies that are already existing and how they impact your businesses and products on the market, and try to use that group advocacy for change.
This is very. Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Thank you so much, Ayodele. If you have any questions, I'm sorry to say we'll have to send that through the inbox because we are right on time. Sorry? Oh, we have time for 2 more. Great. Can we have?
Yeah. So my question is around profitability. So when you talk about social impact, right? How do you approach balancing profitability with when you're doing social impact work? Should profitability be even a KPI when you're doing social impact work?
Yeah, so I mean, to me, that depends on your source of funds, right? So, if you have a short-term horizon, we're going to take in a bunch of investment, attack a problem, and then once we're out of money, we're done. If that's what you're doing, then profitability isn't your primary concern. Impact is your primary concern. If you're trying to build a sustainable venture and your source of funds are people who expect a return, that has to be paramount, right? If part of your social impact is you're going to be employing people who are going to be working with you on that problem, then you have to be financially sustainable to be able to make payroll reliably on an ongoing basis. That you can't just have up quarters and down quarters and not make payroll, right? But it depends on your source of funds and how your business model is working. I have tended, I know we have different types of folks here on the panel. I have tended to focus on ventures that do have a social drive, but they are primarily a capitalist sort of, we are going to be a profitable model in order to accomplish that. And so to me, that's much more apparent. I put much more focus on it.
Yeah, I would just say, or add to that, it's not entirely a financing decision, right? I mean, it can be. You could look at it through that lens and say, where am I sourcing my capital and work backwards. But again, you can also start with the impact and the scale of that impact. And again, the closer you exist to that which is attractive to some of these founders, when you're in the ideation phase, is really when you want to consider some of these things and make sure that you stay true to that. And if you can see 3 steps ahead even to where you're trying to go and the scale you're trying to exist at, that's going to then guide some of your finance decisions around where do we source this capital from? Is it grant funding? You can first find your way there too. We have one of our fellows started off, they immigrated from Nigeria. They couldn't get access to a credit card. And so they said, well, how do I fix this? How do I solve this? This is a very personal problem for them. And they came up with this program where they worked with communities in the public sector to help fund access to a credit score, essentially helping people build credit. And then about halfway through that venture, they said, what are we doing? We're creating a bunch of people who now have access to credit cards. I wonder who might be interested in securing some of that in a profitable way. How about banks and credit lenders? And now it's $1 billion business. It's a unicorn that's within our impact fund. So again, you can find your way there, but keep your eyes and ears open to where those opportunities might exist to grab that funding.
Ayodele, anything to add?
Uh, I feel like they said it all, but I would say that sometimes the market decides for you. Because to be a sustainable business, you need earnings. And I guess maybe the question would be the quantum of profitability that you're looking, to achieve. And just again finding the balance. The double mission is possible. If you're not profitable, someone else will be paying for your business to exist. And at the end of the day, the market might choose, to push you out. So I would say when thinking about impact, do not forget about profitability. I think it's essential. And you don't have to go for maximum earnings. You can also just be okay as a company breaking even. Yeah.
Just want to add one other quick comment. So I don't want to disparage nonprofits. I actually have nonprofit clients, 501c3, 501c4, and globally that do fantastic work. And some of them do that through the kind of beachhead strategy that he was outlining there. There's a great one out of the UK called the Unconnected, and they're doing digital equity work all over the world. And one example of their projects is they're doing a lot of connecting schools around the world using Starlink. And I mean, for them, the whole thing's funded by Starlink. I mean, for Starlink, it's a way to get into these countries, establish a beachhead, establish a positive marketing message, and then get access to the regulatory environment that will approve their LEO satellite service. I mean, but Starlink in the process is willing to fund this initiative. And so for the people who run the Unconnected, like, great, that's an aligned source of funding that is allowing them to do their work. They don't have aspirations to be, a profitable unicorn, right? Like, they just want to do the work. And so it kind of goes back to like, what are you trying to accomplish? What is your goal?
Thank you so much for that very insightful conversation. Does anybody have any other question before we step it up a notch? Any question? Okay, so I think since I'm resuming for my MBA program, I've become super time conscious that I forgot that we still have a lot of time. So, so we want to step it up a notch and go a little personal into the journeys of our panelists, right? Because they've come a long way. And there are lots of lessons that we would not find in the books or find online. And even if we did find anything online, they are always too unrealistic to start with. So now we want to ask some personal questions in terms of, we've talked about your challenges. Now, what is the one thing you find fulfilling? I know everybody wants to solve the complex problems. Now there's climate change disrupting everything from power to risk, resilience, and the likes. But what would you say is the one thing that has kept you going? Because it's tough, right? It's really, really tough, particularly for me coming from Africa, right? I've seen a lot of things, right? So for you, what would you say is the one thing that has kept you going in terms of tapping into creating the impact that you set out to do, and also tapping into the right finance and the right network of people to scale what you are, the solutions you brought about?
Sure. That's a great one. I think what I'm most, as I mentioned before, I'm not an entrepreneur myself, or at least I don't consider myself one. So for me, I think the most fulfilling thing and how I found my way to impact was really through enabling others and helping others, and especially through Global Good Fund, which goes out and seeks these entrepreneurs all over the globe to give them access to structured mentorship, a little bit of funding, eventually access to capital that they've never had before. Being able to help someone come to the starting line who never would have otherwise had access or ability to do so, I think that's by far the most rewarding thing. I'm very fortunate. I think all of us here, honestly, are fortunate by virtue of being here. I'm an MBA student here, by the way, just so everyone, yeah. So I think we're all fortunate to be a part of this community where we have these discussions, but there are so many brilliant people out there who are just waiting to solve a problem that never have any clue or ability or idea or wherewithal to get to that starting line. So I think helping people get there has been the most rewarding thing for me.
Awesome, helping people get there. How about you, Michael?
Yeah, well, I mean, so I identified early on in my career that like education was the area where I wanted to have the most multiplying impact, right? So I fundamentally believe that the future of humanity is most impacted by how we educate our youth, right? And I think that every country's economic future is also most impacted by how they invest in and educate their youth. So almost everything I've done throughout my career has ended up steering in that direction. And now I'm at the point in my career where I've done that successfully. in multiple, ventures already, but now I'm consulting and I have the bandwidth to be able to pick and choose my clients of like, who do I think is having a positive impact? And also for me, I get to, you do definitely some sort of self-justification of understanding like, what is the impact that's being had? So while I may have a client that is specifically focused on social emotional learning and they're helping on that side of the equation, I may have another client that's working on cybersecurity. And it's like, well, without that, these institutions risk collapse. So like, they all have an important part to play. But it's understanding when you're doing that work, what are the stories? What is the impact that that work is having? And letting those stories drive your motivation internally, right? So you're not waking up at the end of the day thinking, how do I help this client make more money? You're waking up, how do I help this client, help more schools, solve this problem so that these students can get an education safely, securely.
Mindset. But this is everything, right? So Ayodele, over to you. I want to hear you.
So my journey has been a bit unconventional, but I would say something that's been keeping me going is my curiosity. So at the core of it all, one thing that I really want to solve is poverty, so poverty alleviation. And I started my career with a private debt fund, trying to alleviate poverty through microfinance. And, spending about 5 years there and, seeing an array of companies, so commercial banks to small microfinance institutions. And I noticed that, the larger institutions were getting more capital, and this was not just because of their balance sheet was able to absorb it. There was also a problem where, the founders of local banks were struggling just by virtue of being local. And so my curiosity led me to equity and, trying to support local founders with equity so that they can scale their businesses. And, working in the equity space and just seeing the lack of diversity across founding teams, leadership teams, kind of sparked my anger in wanting to see a fair and equitable world. And that's how I ended up at TWIC. So, just always questioning myself throughout the journey and trying to see a world that I would like. And, aligning my career with that has led me here.
Thank you so much. So to wrap it up, because we're done for today, I'm sure that we've learned a lot, we've heard a lot, and I know that we're inspired in some way or the other to do better, even if not now, probably much later when you want to start diving into your own social impact venture or trying to look for investment for your co-founder. I'll just need two people to just tell me in one sentence what they've learned from this entire process so that we know that we're all listening. I don't want to have to peek. So 2 volunteers. I'm tempted. Ariana.
You were gonna call me anyway. Hi, my name is Ariana. I am known in the MBA program because I am really interested in entering the sports business and increasing equity within sports. So my favorite quote that I said from here is being able to help people get there, because being a woman, being a Black woman, being a part of the LGBTQ plus community, there are a lot of minority communities that I'm involved in that I see could use help getting where I am. So that one quote really stuck out to me.
Thank you so much. The last person, so that I don't have to point. Okay.
One takeaway, I think, was that the language is so much more important than what you want to put forth. You know in your own mind the goal, but in a sense, the language or the way you put forth your ideas to relevant parties, and it has to change as per context. So context is key.
Thank you so much. So if you have questions or any other thing, you could just do the email sent to Ayodele. She's going to send to our guests. So thank you so much to our panelists.
I just wanted to make some quick announcements before everyone leaves. So Entrepreneurship Week, as we know, is going on for the rest of the week. So we still have a couple of sessions. Feel free to register and join them. They'll always be really interesting. I know everyone can go to all, even though you might want to, but yeah, the registration link is all over our Instagram, LinkedIn. And then today we actually have Navigating Tech's evolution at 5:30 at the Innovate Carolina Junction. So it's gonna be really good. And yeah, thank you to all our clubs and sponsors. So yeah, have a great day, everyone.
You won't be able to.
So much.